F1 CEO and President Stefano Domenicali met with team principals in Montreal for his regular Saturday coffee meeting, during which there were clashes between bosses over porpoising in the aftermath of the FIA's technical directive. Mercedes F1 boss Toto Wolff said after the meeting that his rival team boss's behaviour during the porpoising debate has been pitiful and disingenuous, playing political games while he emphasized the safety concerns involved. Rival teams have been less vocal about any potential FIA intervention than Mercedes, particularly Red Bull, which has not had as much trouble with porpoising on its car this year. During the meeting, it was brought to Wolff's attention that some teams, particularly Ferrari and Alpine, believe the TD was a violation of the regulations and that his team's use of a second-floor stay was illegal. Horner is said to have then suggested to Wolff that Mercedes' porpoising issues stemmed from the team's car concept rather than the regulations themselves, and that it was up to the German manufacturer to get its own house in order. The issue with Mercedes is more severe, or certainly has been, prior to Canada than any other car. That surely is down to the team. That's within their control to deal with that, if it's not affecting others. I know it was said other drivers had been complaining. Our drivers have never complained about porpoising. They've said certain circuits could do with tidying up, perhaps resurfacing in places. But we haven't had an issue with bouncing. The problem is they're running their car so stiff. I think their concept is the issue rather than the regulation. Horner was unimpressed with how the FIA intervened in the matter by issuing a technical directive on the eve of the Canadian Grand Prix as the teams were traveling to the event. He also shared other teams' concerns about how Mercedes was able to fit a second stay to its car so quickly, sparking speculation about whether or not the German car manufacturer was aware of what was going on prior to the announcement. There is a process of these things to be introduced. I think what was particularly disappointing was the second stay. It has to be discussed in a technical forum, and that is overtly biased to sorting one team's problems out, which were the only team that turned up here with it, even in advance of the TD. So work that one out. The meeting took place with Netflix cameras present, as they followed Wolff during the Montreal weekend while filming the 5th season of Drive to Survive. When asked by the media if it was a good idea for Netflix to film a private meeting, Horner responded, "I think there was an element of theatre going on in that meeting. So maybe with Lewis's new movie coming along, they're getting him enrolled for it." The FIA will meet with technical directors this week to try to make progress on the porpoising issue as part of a medium-term plan to give teams more ability to manage things starting in 2023 with rule changes. But Horner is skeptical that anything drastic is required, believing that by next year, all teams will be on top of the situation. You've got some of the brightest engineering talent in the world, and things will converge. I doubt we'll be sitting here next year talking about the bouncing, even if the regulations are left alone. These cars are still relatively new, and I think as teams add developments to their cars, you'll probably start to see them start to address some of these issues. And you can't just suddenly change technical regulations halfway through a season. If a car is dangerous, a team should not field it. It has a choice. Or the FIA, if they feel an individual car is dangerous, they always have a black flag at their disposal. This is where the disagreements arise. The paddock appears to be divided on this issue. F1 world champion Mika Häkkinen, for example, has expressed his support for FIA intervention to combat bouncing. It's good to see the FIA listening to concerns about driver safety. As usual, the best way to get to sort it out is to measure what's happening and then make some decisions based on what the data shows. Of course, some teams want to see changes, especially if the porpoising is making their cars uncompetitive. But once the FIA teams and drivers can get an accurate picture of what's really happening, the right steps can be taken. After threatening disqualification for cars that bounce too frequently or too severely, the FIA decided to back down until more data on the issue was gathered. According to the TD, some teams still made changes to their cars, with Mercedes finishing the weekend with Lewis Hamilton on the podium for the first time since the season opener in Bahrain. They continue to be the only team on the grid without a retirement, with both Hamilton and teammate George Russell posting consistent results throughout the season. Mercedes has the one thing both Red Bull and Ferrari lack: reliability. They are also quick enough to be consistently third fastest car on the track, and able to pick up good points whenever Red Bull or Ferrari have any issues. This looked like a step forward in terms of race setup. The team have been trying new things in the car, sometimes making it very difficult for both drivers, but Sunday looked positive. Furthermore, teams were supposed to be allowed to take extra measures to strengthen their floors, such as the previously mentioned addition of a second floor stay. However, while the FIA's response caused concern because it did not strictly adhere to the correct procedures, the planned bouncing limit for later in the year could be detrimental to Mercedes because of FIA intervention if it continues to hit the ground. That is why Red Bull's chief advisor, Helmut Marko, stated that while the team does not see the need for the FIA to intervene in the matter, it could ultimately harm Mercedes. Speaking to the media about the situation, Marko stated that the FIA's threat of forcing the worst affected teams to lift their cars was precisely what could hurt Mercedes the most. It basically backfired for Mercedes. But I fully agree with Max. It is not correct to change something like this during the season. It can't be the FIA who is making our setups. Changing the ride height means changing the setup, and the FIA can't do that. My next point is all of this is the result of one team having problems. That team should just sort out their own problems, not affect other teams. Nonetheless, ignoring all of the drama and conspiracy theories circulating in Montreal, Mercedes has had a very successful weekend. While Lewis Hamilton and George Russell's third and fourth place finish matched previous season highs, the Montreal performance was the team's most competitive race of the campaign in pure pace terms. This has fueled speculation that Mercedes is on the verge of finally challenging pace-setters Red Bull and Ferrari, particularly as F1 moves to high-speed and smooth circuits like Silverstone and Paul Ricard, which should suit its car. Toto Wolff, on the other hand, is remaining cautious, recalling how similar levels of optimism after the Spanish Grand Prix vanished quickly. One swallow doesn't make a summer. We saw that swallow in Barcelona, but somehow it flew somewhere else. I think we need to be careful. We were off the pace on Friday. In the wet we were good, and I think that was respectable. And I think that in the race at times, we were with the quickest cars. In the second stint, Lewis and George were almost matching the frontrunners. They were not quite, but on some laps, yes. That is very encouraging to see, but we just need to be careful. There's so much work we need to do in order to be back at the front, and we're not there yet. For Hamilton, who took his second podium finish of the season after finishing third in season opener in Bahrain, the result has boosted his confidence for the rest of the season. It's given me and the team a lot of hope. I think that there's more to come from this car. The potential is truly there if we can get the setup right, and I think that's been the most difficult thing this year, really trying to optimize the setup. The window for this car is much, much smaller than any other car we've experienced. One of the biggest takeaways from the Montreal weekend, according to Wolff, was seeing Hamilton finally have a weekend where circumstances do not conspire against him. Wolff welcomed a more straightforward delivery in Canada, after a number of events where bad timing of safety cars or minor events harmed him. There were a lot of races that had worked against him, where he could have scored a podium or a much better result, and it was not his wrongdoing, but bad luck. Seeing him now on the positive side, and being on the podium without anything in a way gifted, that's good to see. What are your thoughts on the situation? What action should the FIA take? Do you believe Mercedes will be able to compete with Ferrari and Red Bull in the coming races? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to click the bell button to be notified of future videos.